Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. Dr. Melissa Gomez is a Las Crucen who has been practicing wellness medicine in our local community for the last 2 years. She grew up in Las Cruces, graduated from Oñate High School, and then went on to attend the University of Notre Dame. She then attended medical school at UNM and did her residency training at Texas Tech University in El Paso, Texas. She is passionate about the Las Cruces community and helping to keep our community members healthy. Her clinic focuses on helping to treat diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, overweight and obesity, and other chronic disease that decrease quality of life. She also does health and wellness seminars around town in order to help educate the community on how to be happy and healthy. And happy and healthy we shall be, Dr. Gomez. Thank you very much for being here today. And November is National Diabetes Month, and it's a big month, I know, in your practice. Tell us, what is a good way to manage diabetes as we look at an issue that is big in our community?
In my opinion, I think the best way to manage diabetes is to try to work on dietary changes so that you don't need as many medications. You can prevent the development of needing insulin. And the truth is that I think there's a misconception that people have that diabetes is something that once they get it, they can't cure it. But if you manage it really well, especially in the early stages, and eat the right foods, it is 100% curable in almost every single patient. That's a type 2 diabetic. We're not talking about the childhood diabetes.
Well, you know, in looking at diabetes, I look at myself, for example. I remember the first time I got tested for diabetes, I was about 31 years old or something. And I remember I went to a diabetes outreach event, and she checked and she said, well, you have to be careful because you are prone to having diabetes. And that shocked me because I wasn't aware of me being prone to it. What are some key demographics of people that have to be on alert for diabetes?
In this day and age in America, the truth is that the way that we've come to eat in our country, I would say everybody's at risk for diabetes. Everybody. And we tend to have the type of diet that has a lot of the things in it that cause the diabetes, which is primarily the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates in the diet are what cause the diabetes. So there are certain people that are at higher risk, certainly people that have a lot of family history of diabetes, Hispanics and Latin Americans, Native Americans, blacks. They all have, I think, a genetic propensity to have it a little bit easier than other races, but still I would say every single human that eats a lot of carbohydrates is at risk. So I think we should be talking about just in general all of our risks rather than kind of pinpointing certain communities that might be at higher risk.
What surprises you the most about diabetes and how, as you said, everybody needs to be on alert for it? Yeah. Is it our diet? Are we evolving? What's the issue here?
I think the problem is we haven't evolved.
Okay.
And so our diet has changed drastically really in the last 60 to 70 years. But our evolutionary genetics have not had time to adapt to this new, easily accessible, highly processed, carbohydrate-laden diet. If you look back at the 1970s is when the food pyramid came out, which is when the federal government started telling Americans this is a general guideline of how you should eat, and the entire bottom of it was a carbohydrate diet. So what happened was not that humans changed, but that our diet changed. It was much harder to access carbohydrates in the past, especially in the amounts that we have them now. So it's modern world and modern society that has caused the diabetes much more so than humans somehow mutating quickly to become all diabetic.
Let's talk about the food pyramid because it's evolved, it's different now, but the food pyramid I grew up with was high on carbohydrates. Whose idea was that?
The federal government came out with a food pyramid, and they basically felt that fats were the enemy, and fats were what was causing a lot of heart disease and other chronic medical problems. And so they said, let's put fats as a food that we eat sparingly, and let's go on ahead and let the carbohydrates loose. Unfortunately, the data that they used was not the highest quality data, and since then we've come up with a lot of much more high quality information. As a matter of fact, the entire sugar industry conspired to help the federal government look away from sugar as a cause of heart disease in the 1960s. And a very provocative article just came out in the Journal of American Medical Association documenting how the sugar industry paid some physicians to do some research that pointed away from sugar as a cause of heart disease, and thus allowed us to kind of focus on fats. So there was a lot of political maneuvering in that food pyramid that happened.
And along with that came the evolution of processed sugars, which I would think is a big cause for diabetes as well.
So right, I think that the number one thing that people can look to in terms of why, even in the 1950s or 40s, even though there was sugar available, there was not as much diabetes, is because the sugar has become so highly processed and readily available. So we didn't put high fructose corn syrup in everything back in the day, but now you look at the average bread at the supermarket, and oftentimes the second ingredient is high fructose corn syrup, which your great-great-grandmother would never have thought to put in her bread in her homemade recipe, right? So much has changed, and the availability of highly processed sugars has made our propensity to have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, and many related conditions, much more prevalent in our bodies.
I went through a phase where my doctor said I needed to watch my weight and I need to watch my sugar intake, and one of the key things that she warned me about was high fructose corn syrup. And I decided I was going to give it up. And it was easy to give up the soda. It was challenging, at first. But then I started looking around at the things that had high fructose corn syrup. I had no problem eating potatoes and, French fries, but then to add ketchup, that's the second ingredient that ketchup has.
Yes.
How difficult is it to get into that kind of diet? I mean, what do you tell your patients?
Well, I'm not saying it's not challenging, and I think, one of the hardest things that people have to do in life is we try not to make it seem like it is just a diet. We kind of try to encourage it to be as a lifestyle change, but when everything that you buy at the grocery store, it's hidden in everything. It's hidden in your, sandwich dressings, your, mayonnaises and your salad dressings. It's hidden everywhere. The best that I can say is that what I tell patients to do is try to eat the most natural foods that they can. So I try to steer them away from things like salad dressings and other sauces, because a lot of times even sauces that you wouldn't assume have sugar in them and high fructose corn syrup, they do. So I always try to tell people, go as natural as you can. If it generally came from the earth and it was produced by a tree or a plant made it, or it came from an animal, those things have been in the human diet since the dawn of man. But if it came from a company and there's more ingredients in there than you can count, or many of them you don't even recognize.
That's the key.
That's a good way to buy at the grocery store, and try to stay away from the foods that have caused so much trouble in our bodies.
Of course, you are a doctor at Mountain View Medical Center, and your clinic focuses on helping to treat diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, overweight, and obesity, and other chronic diseases that decrease quality of life. And that's one of the things that caught my attention, quality of life.
Yes.
What challenges do you face when educating your patients about quality of life?
I think that a lot of people don't necessarily notice when they start to have a decreased quality of life because of the habits and the food primarily. So sometimes I find that when I'm asking people how they feel, they didn't even realize that they felt as bad as they did. So they may have had a very slow process of starting to feel fatigued all the time, get regular headaches, not sleep well at night. And they just kind of maybe take it for granted as I'm getting older, or my kids, and I'm too worried about them. But so much is really just related to the habits and the food, and exercise, of course, is critically important. And so I think the challenge is to try to kind of have people self-contemplate and say, how is my quality of life? And is my quality of life as good as I assume that it should be at this moment? And most people can kind of ask themselves that question honestly. and get a good answer for themselves. And a lot of people, I think, once they start to say, you know what, I'm so sick of feeling tired all the time, then I start to get an opening to be able to make changes in people's lives. But before that, I think people struggle to make these dietary changes because part of quality of life is food, right? Mm-hmm. And so you get a lot of quality out of eating a good meal with your family, and if you have to restrict yourself, sometimes you lose a little bit of quality there.
Would you say people thinking age affects their quality of life as a myth?
To a certain extent. I think as we do get older, we're not going to be able to do that,
not.
that crazy sports thing that we used to do and stay up all night long and all those things we used to do when we were younger. But I think, yes, as we age, we don't have to accept poor quality of life. I mean, people can do triathlons in their 90s and run marathons, and, so we don't have to accept that as, oh, you know what, I'm getting older, I gain weight, and that's just going to happen to me. My memory is a little bit less than it used to be. These are not things we should accept as normal aging processes. These can really be kept up to very high quality as we get older.
Your focus is wellness. What produces a student from Oñate High School here in Las Crucen a night to get into wellness? Business. Why is that important to you?
Well, Edmundo, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do after I graduated from high school, like many of us, but I knew I had an inkling that I wanted to help people. I hadn't really thought about medicine in high school, but I really felt like after doing some volunteer experiences and feeling the goodness that came out of helping others, and really the goodness that I got, because I think half the time you get as much when you do volunteer work and help others as the people you're helping get, and maybe you get more. So I really felt like I wanted to be in a field where I could make a difference in people's lives, and I could feel that in a palpable way on a regular basis. So after a certain degree of uncertainty in college, I finally found my place in medicine, and haven't looked back.
How do you, as a doctor, define wellness for your patients?
Well, we have a little, a little tag in our clinic that we define wellness as happy, hungry, horny.
Happy, hungry, horny.
Yes.
Okay. For the sake of our viewers, why don't you explain that?
Well, and forgive me, Mom and Dad, but in terms of what we feel like defines a good quality of life, you can say, a good blood pressure and a good cholesterol panel can be good markers of health, but really that doesn't translate into anything meaningful in somebody's day in and day out life. So the things that we know really mark health are the way a human body feels. And when a human body feels, a delight in a day and having the ability to smile and laugh easily and not feel like just getting through the day is a chore and a task, when they feel like they have appropriate hunger or appropriate satiety, which many patients that I see, they don't have that at all. They either have absolutely no hunger or they feel voracious hunger constantly, but that kind of natural ebb and flow of hunger just doesn't exist in their bodies. That's a good sign of your body's metabolism working well. And then also having a drive to be interactive and intimate with a partner and really just interactive with other humans in general. This is a really great way to define quality of life, because that is really what life is all about. So we like that little simple hashtag because it explains so much in a few words about how in medicine, I think we sometimes use surrogates of health to try to define what's a healthy person, like your blood pressure looks good, your blood sugar looks good, but really, how does the patient feel? If your blood sugar is perfect, but you feel tired all the time, that's not really what we're looking for. So we try to kind of help patients feel their bodies out and tell us what's going on inside of you, because you can have all the right numbers and everything looks good on paper, but if you don't feel good, that's not health. That's not quality of life.
And how does sexual appetite fit into this?
So when people are unhealthy, oftentimes one of the very first things to go is sexual appetite. Additionally, when you have medical problems like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, your circulation is not, necessarily of the best quality, and so that
does this go for both men and women?
This is true for men and women, although I would say that men tend to feel the vascular side effects of that more than women do. Women generally have a lot more of a psychological kind of component to their sex drive than men do, but overall, I would say that when families and husbands and wives and whatnot completely lose that desire, then we know that something's not quite right with their health oftentimes, an underlying reason why they don't feel the desire to be sexually active with their partner. And that's a big red flag that we try not to shy away from in the doctor's office, although I think sometimes people, both doctors and patients, are shy to talk about.
So how do you break the ice?
You just ask about it. You know that it's that important. So you generally try to ask about it without, making anybody feel embarrassed. In a nonchalant way that doesn't make it seem like it's something to be shameful about or feel guilt over or anything like that. But really I just go straight forward.
How challenging is, and I use the word challenging because I would imagine that you've got some patients that go in thinking, I've got diabetes or my cholesterol's high, and suddenly they find themselves thinking about a question, how is your sexual appetite? And they're not thinking about it going in to see their doctor, that they're going to be questioned about their sex life. How difficult is it to get them to start talking about that and really start thinking about that being part of a wellness program?
I think that once the ice is broken, most people are so, in the doctor's office, I actually feel like when you ask somebody about things that seem very private and personal, because they feel that there's, a doctor-patient relationship, it's a very private room and the door is closed and everything's very confidential. I think once somebody breaks the ice about many questions, we ask a lot about, bowel movements and other kind of, inappropriate topics and other situations.
That would be inappropriate at a dinner setting.
Right. And so we ask about those things very often because once we break that ice, I think somebody finally feels like, oh my gosh, somebody asked me about this? Like, it worries me, but I didn't want to bring it up with anybody. So if I can break the ice for them, then they feel a lot more comfortable to start talking about it in a way that their information will be protected and it won't, go out of that room. So I think oftentimes it's a relief. And
is this something that because you go around to different parts of the community, and you can find more information on the Mountain View website, which is
www.mountainviewdocs.com.
Okay, where people can get information on. Is this something that you bring to your talks?
Well, my talks have covered different topics almost every time. And so there are certain talks where we bring it up and certain talks where we're talking about something completely different. So I try to change the topics each month. And so it's not necessarily the same thing. 1 month I'll be talking about food and nutrition. 1 month I'll be talking about depression. 1 month I'll be talking about the gut health and gut flora and the importance of that. So it depends on whether or not it's pertinent to what we're discussing at that month. But we do bring it up at the community events.
How do you go about spreading the word about these events and, reaching out to the target audience that you're trying to reach? And, is it difficult to do that?
It can be a little difficult. We've done the local newspaper and have not done as much of that. But we do the newspaper at times. We do flyers in our own offices and the other doctors in our community. We put flyers in their office. We advertise at the sites that we're going to do it. So I've done many at the Natural Grocery Store, and they put that in their local flyer. We do some at the Senior Circle, and they have a flyer there. But I would say that maybe marketing it has been a little bit of a challenge for us because we want to definitely let as many people know that we're having these events as possible. And they're free to the public, and anybody can attend. But yes, marketing is something that we're always kind of looking to do.
And it's got to get that word of mouth spread among people that attended the first time, and that you want to encourage them to obviously tell their friends about it.
Yes.
When we spoke earlier, we talked about how you practice wellness, on who should practice wellness, and you break it up into two parts. You think that doctors should be the primary people that practice wellness, but in addition to the patients.
Right.
How do you explain that?
Well, I think that in my training, this is my personal experience, but in my personal experience and my training as a medical student and as a resident, as much as we talked about healing people, I don't know that we really learned as much about trying to get to the root causes of what causes the diseases in the first place. So the Western medical example has been described as kind of a reactionary type of medicine as opposed to a proactive type of medicine. And so I think all physicians should practice wellness because it's so much better if you can catch the problem before the big heart attack or the stroke or the diabetic foot infection. If we can get, all of our community to really catch the patients before things go bad and start giving the education really early, then in essence, all doctors can be wellness physicians and can prevent so many diseases from occurring later in the stages of these medical problems that their patients develop. So I think every doctor should be a wellness, and I really do think almost all doctors, that's what they want to be, but we end up getting sometimes caught up in tests and medications, and we're very busy, and so we don't maybe have the time to counsel on wellness, which does take a while. It's not something that you can just do quick in and out the door. And of course, all humans, all Americans, all human beings should strive to do some wellness in their life so that they don't have this lack of quality of life after they've developed these medical illnesses that do take so much from that quality.
What are some facts and myths regarding wellness from both doctors and patients?
Well, I think my personal clinic, I think the biggest struggle I have is to try to convince people that fat, which we have been told is a horrible disease-causing food in our diet, is really not such. The truth is that it's the processed fats, the trans fats, the fast food fats, and these are the fats that have been detrimental to our health. But overall, the fats that were created on this earth, that come from Mother Nature, that come from natural sources, are not these villainous foods that we've been trying to put in a category of just don't eat those at all. And so my biggest struggle, I think, is just trying to convince patients that it's okay to, go on ahead and, put some butter in the pan or use a little bit of, bacon in their Brussels sprouts or something like that, because they've been told their whole life that's a horrible thing.
And that is part of what I grew up with.
Yes.
That's the diet I grew up with. And in cooking for my children, they're confused as all heck because, sometimes there's fat in it and sometimes there isn't. And, in looking at processed carbs, grains, and sugars, what are some, how many times do you hear, I'm just too busy in my house to worry about these things, and it's so much convenient to go out to a fast food restaurant and get a meal?
Yeah, I hear that every day, and I try really hard to work with the patients and ask them, what is the most difficult part of this diet for you at every visit, or this lifestyle, I should say, at every single visit, and try to troubleshoot with them so that I can see where their struggles are. We try to come up with meal plans with patients. We try to help them troubleshoot, hey, let's get that crock pot out, let's put that meat in there, let's get it cooking, so that way when you get home from that basketball practice at 9 o'clock at night, the food's already made, but you didn't have to stop by McDonald's. So we try really hard and we try our best, and and then we tell people, if you have to go to McDonald's every once in a while, go ahead. Just maybe leave the bun behind and eat the meat, and try not to do the French fries or the soda, maybe get the salad. And so we really try our best to work with our patients, because we don't want anybody to feel like this is something impossible. Because I do think it is possible, and really it's how our ancestors ate in the past, so we know it's possible. It's just hard in a hectic world with a lot of obligations. So we try very hard, though, to work with patients on that.
Do you have a favorite cookbook that you use?
Honestly, my favorite place to look for recipes is Pinterest. So I just go to Pinterest because I buy cookbooks and then I forget about them, and then they're sitting in a cupboard with dust on them. So I go to Pinterest and I type in low carb recipes, and that's all I need. And I'll within the first few scrolls, I'll see some amazing recipes that both me and my husband have really enjoyed. My family, my children, and so we really do use the internet.
Really?
Yeah, that's where we go.
All right, here's the tricky question: how should we approach the holidays? When dealing with wellness and diabetes and high cholesterol?
Well, I think I try to give the message to people in two ways. Number one, I say we're all human. And so if you really love pumpkin pie and that's your thing and you look forward to it every year, have the piece of pumpkin pie and don't feel bad about it. But we try to say, let's say if there's a way for us to incorporate the healthy recipes in there, do it. So we love telling people, hey, if you love mashed potatoes, do a cauliflower mashed potato. If you love, your sweet potatoes, do the sweet potato, but maybe leave off the marshmallows and leave off the brown sugar and just do a less sugary sweet potato. And then, do your proteins, do some nice sides that have, bacon and Brussels sprouts, or deviled eggs is a great way to go without a lot of sugar and carbs. But we really also try to tell patients, hey, you know what? Every once in a while, if you go and eat whatever this thing is that isn't that great for your health, do it and don't feel that guilty about it. Just don't do it every day. If you do it every once in a while, that's okay. Even God gave us things like honey and, maple syrup, and those are very sugary, but they weren't available all the time. We couldn't have them as much as we wanted all the time. So that's kind of the difference. If you do it sparingly, you're okay. If we do it all the time, like we tend to do in America, it gets us in trouble.
Well, okay. So there's a substitute for mashed potatoes.
There's a substitute for mashed potatoes? Okay.
Cauliflower.
Cauliflower, right.
All right. And you look at sugary, you can replace by not adding marshmallows to the sweet potatoes. But how in the world do you replace tamales?
There's a tamale recipe on Pinterest
There
that
is
is made with a masa that's out of cauliflower. Cauliflower is an excellent vegetable. It can substitute for rice, potatoes, hash browns,
Cauliflower.
pizza crust, cauliflower.
The white.
The white, yep. everybody's
bulbous thing that everybody
Yes.
says it's white broccoli.
Yeah, it's white broccoli, kind of bland, but that's the beauty of it. It's so bland, you could turn it into anything. It's like white flour.
What
So-
about desserts?
Yeah, I mean, so we do, like I said, we're going to supply our patients with a recipe for low carb pumpkin pie. And so it'll probably be sweetened with maybe a little bit of maple syrup and then maybe a little bit of stevia or one of the better quality artificial sugars, because artificial sugars have their own issues. But yeah, Edmundo, you tell me what you want for Thanksgiving and I'll give you a good recipe for it.
Okay, let's wrap up the show by encouraging people. What are some words of advice that you give somebody that's struggling with their diet? They might be overweight, and they've struggled with their diet all of their lives. And they try out a diet, but right smack in the middle of it, they quit. I mean, what are some words of advice that you give to these people?
I think the most profound thing that maybe a patient that's struggling with their weight can hear, the first thing that they should hear is it's not their fault. I mean, the world that we live in, the foods that we eat, and the hormones that change in your body as you gain weight make it very incredibly difficult for weight loss to occur. Which is why, when you have that issue, go ask for help. And, whether it's your doctor or our group or whoever, but the first thing you need to know is it's not your fault. Many of these things you can't overcome with just willpower. So that's a nice thing to hear, I think, when patients are struggling with their weight, is it's not your fault. Your hormones are raging and changing, and that's what's making it so difficult for you to just even stay with any one particular diet. And then the best second thing I think that we could say just as a general overarching theme is just try to eat as natural as you can. If you could imagine your great-great-grandmother generally eating it, it's probably not going to be so bad for you. But if it didn't exist at all and the ingredients in there were never available in, 100 years ago, those are the things you can easily, pinpoint by just looking at the label and then maybe saying, you know what, I'm not going to do that weird, processed chip product, but I'm going to do almonds because those have been around forever.
Dr. Melissa Gomez, thank you very much for coming into Fronteras, A Changing America, for being here today, and in all honesty, for being a local resident, a local kid that came back to Las Cruces to practice medicine here, because that's something that Las Cruces really needs.
Thank you so much for having me, Edmundo.
For Fronteras, A Changing America, I'm Edmundo Resendez. Thank you for joining us.